Todo esto es bioeconomía.
Bioeconomy.
En la Amazonía. Y promoverla nos lleva a un
futuro
con más
qualidade de vida,
Well-being.
calidad de vida,
oportunidades
económicas
Economic opportunities.
y protección de la biodiversidad.
biodiversidade,
Biodiversity.
conexão,
Innovation.
Convergencia para la bioeconomía en la Panamazonía. Panamazonía en red. Foro de innovación e inversiones en la bioeconomía. Sean bienvenidos.
Welcome everyone.
sejam bem-vindos.
Bueno, muy bienvenidos a esta red panamazónica, a este
Welcome
foro.
to the Pan-Amazon Network for Bioeconomy and talking about investment and convergence in the Pan-Amazon region. This is a forum that encourages innovation, convergence between the different decision makers in the different sectors and who have the purpose of promoting a sustainable bioeconomy led locally over all of the Amazon.
De las ciudades y por qué son tan importantes. Más de 50 millones de personas viven en la región panamazónica.
Recording in progress.
Pueblos, asentamientos en la Amazonía que enfrentan riesgos sociales y ambientales considerables. Más de la mitad de las poblaciones urbanas de la región viven en condiciones vulnerables. Esta situación se agrava en las poblaciones indígenas y afrodescendientes que viven en las ciudades. Por ejemplo, en Bolivia y en Brasil tenemos una población indígena y
We have an
afrodescendiente.
indigenous population and Afro-descendant population with basic needs that are not being addressed. And this is in more than 80%, according to the information from the OTCA from 2023. The basic services like sanitation, drinking water, waste recycling, and all transport, all of this represents challenges in most of the region. And according to the recent studies of the OTCA, then we have 40% of the population that does not have access to basic sanitation. 40% of the urban population in Bolivia and Ecuador live in complicated conditions. And most of the urban regions, they don't have internet. And added to this challenge is vulnerability of the climate risks and the preservation of social, cultural, and environmental situation to the world. These cities are very important in the economy of the Amazon, and more than 60% of the people in this region is urban, and the economy goes through the cities that have a functional role in these centers, like trading, logistics, and education, access to public policies in general, besides other structures for social and sustainable development of human beings. And in this conversation, we're going to show different perspectives that will allow us to understand the aspects of bioeconomy in the cities as the best cities in terms of infrastructure and how this is essential for the more dynamic bioeconomy in the Amazon. I am Maria Camila Uribe. I am the moderator for today. I am an expert I am from BG. I'm an expert in residences and about Amazonia Sempre. It's a project that provides funding for the Amazon region, and it is made up of 31 cities from 8 countries in the OTCA. And we try to bring together local governments in these countries and join efforts so that these cities in the Amazon can be addressed globally. And besides the challenges that are shared, we have common opportunities to promote urban and sustainable development. So I would like to welcome the speakers who are here today. I would like to introduce them. We have Sheila Litaiff, and she is from the bioeconomy sector from the Brazil Bank in Manaus. And Sheila is going to share with us information about initiatives and the perspectives and the direct action in this territory for the impact of bioeconomy. Welcome, Sheila. I would also like to introduce Paulo Diógenes. He has an official position for water, sanitation, hygiene in UNICEF Brazil, and he worked in the state of the Amazon and in plans that enhance these services in the communities. And finally, Michele Guimarães from Navegam, and she's going to show our perspective about how logistics works in the Amazon. So talking about the challenges of the Amazon bioeconomy in this sector. So I would also like to welcome Michele, Paulo, and Sheila, and I would like to invite the audience to share their questions in the chat so that we can also have some questions at the end who will come from the audience that have joined us. So let us talk about this first, and I'd like to start with Sheila. So for more than a year, the Bank of Brazil started working with the financial aspects to support the economy of the Amazon in Manaus, a very important city for the Amazon, and another one in Belém. And this year, we're also going to have COP30. So could you please tell us a little bit about the COP and how it's going to happen and how important it is to take these services to the region? Sheila, over to you. Good morning, Maria Camila, and everybody who is listening to us. My name is Sheila. I work in Banco do Brasil in the Bioeconomy Hub. I am in Manaus, and I'd like to thank the Pan Amazon Network and BG and the other organizers for the event. Congratulations on this initiative to look at bioeconomy in the Amazon. So I would like to make a presentation talking a little bit about our work here, and I intend to leave a seat for you so that we can talk more times, and I think we'll have the opportunity of creating this area of constructive dialogue. Just a second for me to share my screen. Yes, go ahead. You can share your screen. Can you see my presentation? Yes, we can see it. So I'm quickly going to talk about how the Bank of Brazil has worked a long time focused on sustainability, but over the last few years, the bank decided to establish this strategy of bioeconomy. And I'm going to quickly talk about this timeline, socio-bioeconomy and Banco do Brasil. So in the first half of 2023, the bank did several studies with the partnership and the help of BG, and BG helped the bank to build this strategy. Ever since the first half of the year, there were several meetings with BG and MMA for the introduction and presentation of the strategy. There was a partnership with MMA as well and with the Sociedade Institute in 2024. And there was an event in Belém called Giving Momentum to the Bioeconomy. So they also launched the Bioeconomy Hub at this time. It initially started in Belém and Pará in May of last year. And here in Manaus, it was in September of last year with me. So there are physically in Belém 2 employees who are exclusively working in the bioeconomy, and a manager that coordinates the work. And I stay in Manaus in the Amazon, and the bank wants to extend this to the Northeast and other areas, different hubs. So the bank did several studies and also used the 2030 objectives to see what bioeconomy would be for Brazil. And it looked at the products in the forest that are included in this strategy. The products that I bring over here, I'm going to talk about a few. So for example, nuts, babaçu, cocoa, all of these, fishing as well. It is not a complete list, but we're talking to the communities and the associations, and we also want to include other products that are compatible with the forest. So inside these definitions in the strategy of bioeconomy in the bank, they considered the different areas of the Amazon, the forest of the Amazon, the area of savanna, and the deforested part of Amazon. So there was a different strategy for each of these different Amazons. And besides the bioeconomy strategy, there's also a team that works with carbon credits, and they're going to work very strongly in this area of the Amazon under pressure, one of the areas. And there are several initiatives that have to do with connectivity, urban Amazon, and just so you understand how the bank has defined the strategy. And also, we focus a lot on the value of these products. And today, in spite of the market potential of almost $180 billion a year, these products that are compatible, that are able to participate, this is a market that is focused on this issue of developing the local chains so that we will have greater participation in this global market. I'm going to talk a little bit about the pillars of activity we have worked on, focusing mainly on family agriculture, to be able to stimulate the different lines of agriculture, family agriculture, and the creation of the hub happened because the bank talked to several cooperatives and associations and identified that there was a lot of difficulty for the credit to get to the indigenous population, the population that lived near the river sides, and the quilombola population. So they worked on trying to find out what the difficulties were. So what can we internally inside the bank articulate to be able to get credit to this family and that is working with agriculture. And the hub is basically this construction connection that creates the dialogue for us to be able to address these production chains. So the activities that make it feasible, the bank does the opening of accounts in the communities to make it easier for people to use the bank, to take social inclusion to this population. And they also work with cooperatives and associations for us to have as much support as possible. So we have talked to several cooperatives and associations in the strategy of bioeconomy to be able to have an activity through these associations and cooperatives, and working strongly on the issue of the value chain. The value chain, talking a little bit about that, the bank wants to work on these two things: credit and specialized services for these cooperatives, and also services for the rural producers. So we have addressed cooperatives, trying to provide support, technical support for them in this legal accounting that provides credit from the bank. So we have helped in the issue of documentation, preparing for credit as well. And the value chain, I can also talk a little bit about what the bank has done in terms of working with the companies like Natura, people who can buy the production of these rural producers. So what have we done? We can work with these customers that work in the markets, bringing both ends of the rural producers, so they are making these products get to the wholesalers that are selling the product, and also with several other partnerships with the World Bank, Banco Mundial. So coming to conclusion, this is the strategy that was launched. This is credit agents in socio-bioeconomy. And this is MDA and MMA. It is a joint effort, and it is to provide knowledge, knowledge about this credit, and it's going to be implemented in the Amazon and in the Savannah region. We have 50 agents, credit agents in socio-bioeconomy that are going to address up to 3,500 families in the Amazon and the Savannah region. And there's a potential of providing credit and addressing this 250 million in credit for socio-bioeconomy. Now, I'd like to go back, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about the strategy later on. Over to you. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. I think that Sheila has managed to show this experience very well, the experience that she has in Banco do Brasil. So thank you very much for the presentation, and we're going to continue talking about it. So I'm going to give the floor to Paulo. And Paulo, sustainable development in the Amazon, is it feasible? It is feasible if we have an infrastructure, a basic community infrastructure, especially energy and basic sanitation. We understand how important it is to have an electrical system, a reliable electrical system, and the communities, they need these resources, especially when socio-bioeconomy is important to process and preserve and process the products. And on the other hand, basic sanitation and health care are extremely important also for life and to develop these activities. That's why maybe within this Amazon context, we have to guarantee the minimum conditions to strengthen the production chains, the value chains, how important they are in socio-biodiversity. So please tell us a little bit about access to energy and basic sanitation in the Amazon, and what are the challenges that you face in the communities within this infrastructure, the basic infrastructure that we see in several communities. Over to you. Thank you. Thank you for the introduction, and thank you for the invitation to come and talk and exchange knowledge about this very important topic in our region. And I work in UNICEF in the area of water, sanitation, and hygiene. UNICEF is from the United Nations, and it works on the protection of the rights of children and teenagers. And I think the initial question that probably comes up in most people's heads is, what is the relationship between infrastructure and children and teenagers? So you have an agency from the United Nations that works on the protection of children and teenagers, and then you have money that is going to infrastructure. So we always bring some indicators that are very alarming. The first one is lack of access to drinking water in sanitation, basic sanitation. This is amongst the highest causes of death for children. So UNICEF looks at basic sanitation very carefully and trying to protect the rights of children and teenagers. And about a more technical perspective, going into the issue of sanitation, we understand that especially those who work in the Amazon, without electrical energy, you don't have water, and there is a connection there. So I start by bringing this context of the children with water and energy, also connecting water and energy with sustainable economic development, because without people, we don't have economic development. And without access to electrical energy, quality electrical energy that is reliable. We don't have healthcare, we don't have schools working, and we don't have the basics at home, like refrigerating your food, for example. And without energy in an Amazon community, you're not able to get the water from a well or coming from a river, because this process is done by a pump. So we begin to make this connection, energy and basic sanitation. Without energy, you don't have water, and sanitation is divided into 4 macro components, which is the supply of water, the sanitation, the sewage, and solid waste, and drainage of the water. So when we have a scenario where most of the communities in the Amazon have problems for energy and basic sanitation. Without sanitation, you have disease, you have an unhealthy environment, you have contamination of the water, the soil. So I'm bringing you this context to make you reflect on something, because before we can take economic development, and before we can think about having a production chain or strengthen the economy in a community, a small community in the Amazon, there are infrastructure issues. And if they are not addressed, we're not going to have sustainability. Thinking about the long-term perspective of that work and that investment that was done. And talking about the Amazon, in my experience, especially in Brazil, unfortunately, most of the communities of the region, this is a very low quality energy that they have. And the community in extreme situations, if it's a drought or if there's a storm, we are in a period of climatic phenomena that we have in the Amazon as well. So periodically, these communities spend a day without energy, and many times it's a week, it's 2 weeks without power. So if you don't have power, you don't have schools, you don't have the healthcare stations, and the food in your house spoils, and there's no water, because the water works. The water comes through the pump that I mentioned before. And these same communities, Maria Camila, they also suffer with basic sanitation, lack of basic sanitation. So what we're able to work on today in a very residual form in the Amazon, the communities and the small municipalities as well, this is the component of sanitation that I mentioned. And even this component of water sanitation, we can also focus on the supply, on the quantity of water supplied, the quality of the water in many cases. Because of many challenges, we don't even know about this. But when we talk about the other 3 components, so sewage, solid waste, and the drainage, well, it's, when there's a power cut, and when we look at the reality of the communities, of the traditional indigenous populations, quilombolas, the ones who live by the river, in a small municipality, sewage treatment does not exist. And when it exists, it's something that is very rustic, and usually it's contaminating the environment, like those open sewage drains, and like institutions, public and private institutions, that throw their sewage out, and solid waste. We can talk about management that is not well done. There are many cases, the big areas where they throw garbage, and most of the municipalities in the Amazon don't have this way of recycling waste, and the solid waste that is produced, it's either buried or burnt. And this generates a huge environmental impact through contamination and also in public health, because we don't know what is being burnt and what is being placed buried in the earth. So that contamination that happens through this solid waste and the sewage that is not addressed. And this is the water that is being consumed by these people, because there are several ways of getting water supply. You can have very superficial wells to get the water from this area that is contaminated. So it's contaminated by the sewage, also the solid waste that is buried from different practices. So there's a context, Maria Camila, that is a great challenge in the Amazon. So when we talk about the perspective, the bioeconomic perspective of economic sustainable development in the region, how am I going to talk about the development of a production chain where I need to refrigerate a project like acai or fruit pulp if I don't have electrical energy? How am I going to talk about community tourism if I don't have safe water, if I don't have good management of the solid waste that is going to be generated by tourists, if I don't have safety in terms of healthcare for these people who live there and who are going to visit the place as well? So I bring this reflection because this infrastructure for planning has to be included from the beginning. So let us solve the infrastructure issues so that we can, in parallel, move towards the sustainable economic development in the territories of the Amazon. And we have great challenges here in the region when we talk about infrastructure, and especially in the infrastructure in communities or in small municipalities. One of the first ones that I have on my list is the issue of governance, which is a difficult word for many people here. We can also think about the perspective of institutional organs. So we have difficulty to understand attributions and to create synergy between those who are responsible for these, for sanitation and energy. And when we talk about a community, we cannot divide sanitation and energy. These are topics that move together in a parallel manner. So this is not, this has to be planned together. So what we have today in the region, unfortunately, in many cases, is incoherent technology, because Brazil, for some years, a little over 10 years, we were benefited by the rural electrification program. But in many places, it was a network from a generation that comes from the city that goes to a riverside community or travels through a forest. And, the dealer if there's a problem, the dealer has to send somebody over to fix it. And meanwhile, the community has no energy. And also in the treatment of water, we see that the sector is trying to find a solution for everything. And there isn't one solution, there are many solutions. And these solutions, they have to be according to the local reality. They have to be born in a consultation or something that came from the community base. So it has to be something that the municipality or the community is doing. We have a great challenge in terms of investment and setting priorities in these investments in the sector, especially when we talk about sanitation, which is a very recent topic. Today, the scenario of investment is changing in sanitation in Brazil. It has been open to private investment, but there's still a big gap. And also in terms of challenges, I talk about sustainability. And I think in the long term, because the experience using different models in the Caribbean and in Latin America, some models in Brazil show that decentralized models that work on community management, they work very well. But not all the cases are going to work. So some are going going to need the interference of the state, others won't. So this needs to be seen and it needs to be encouraged as well. But to have community management, we need strengthened communities with cooperatives and associations that are established. And back to the issue of economic development. So that cooperation, that association needs to have some generation of revenue to be able to pay, to be able to make a minimum investment, a rate for the water that is supplied, for taking care of basic sanitation. So also bringing some cases in Latin America and in the Caribbean, the minimum payment for this infrastructure makes the community feel more empowered and it's more adequate in terms of the investment in infrastructure that is done. So it's a water system, if it's photovoltaic system for water uptake or energy for the community, power for the community. So this, there's a sense of property, you know, so the people in the community are paying for this service, so they feel it's their own. And the institutional articulation, as I said before, for me, this is the starting point. We have to understand attributions, who the main actors are, and how these actors need to interact, and that's not easy. And I would like to list some of these main actors here, which, you know, if you talk about governance, if you talk about institutional organizations, it's sometimes very abstract. We have to bring the names of these players. So the community basis, when we talk about a structure in the community, that has to be heard. And if this community base does not participate in the process and is not heard, the probability of an infrastructure investment failing is huge. So first of all, we have to understand what the community basis wants, and you need to have mechanisms to engage it in that issue. And research institutes as well are important to participate in this process, social society and the public sector and private sector. So especially in terms of investment for from the private sector. Thank you. Thank you, Paulo. That was very interesting. Your presentation was very interesting, and you leave us with several things to reflect upon, things that are not only in terms of the needs of infrastructure, but also the sanitation, energy, solid waste, so everything that you talked about, and even the challenges of governance and the need to prioritize, the importance of having work with the communities. And all of this strengthens the work with the private sector and the importance of sustainability, just like this articulation is done between the different stakeholders. And of course, we have many things to still talk about, but let us go back and think about infrastructure, and also for us to be able to listen to the perspective of Michel Guimarães and this relationship between infrastructure and logistics. So sanitation and infrastructure that we're talking about, and that is now being mentioned. So mentioned by Paulo. So it is a necessary condition for us to be able to develop bioeconomy. So what are the best logistic solutions that allow us to take this through all of the different phases? Where is all this going? What are the main points? And how this is transported to the industries and how it gets to the final consumer, the end consumer inside the Amazon region. So this is a Brazilian company in the Amazon, and it promotes logistics solutions. It's called Navegam. And there's a regional economy, and this is a huge field and expansion for activities. We have monitoring, traceability of the products. So, Michele, I would like you to tell us from this perspective that you have, what are the main logistic challenges that you have? and that you have to deal with, and what are the perspectives developed for this? Please.
Adelante, Michelle.
Please go ahead, Michelle. Thank you very much. Well, I'm going to talk about what it means to operate logistics and mobility in very challenging contexts. Paulo said it very well, the issue of the rivers and what does it mean to not have water in our forest. And it was based on these challenges that Navegam was born. Let me share my presentation with you.
Eu sou Michele Guimarães.
So I am Michele Guimarães. I'm the CEO of Navegam. Navegam nowadays is a logistics operator that began as a startup to face the challenges of the Amazon in terms of mobility. So what is this mobility if you don't know our regional context? When we talk about navigation in the Amazon, we have to understand that these are intercontinental distances many times. So I bring you some examples of the Amazon specifically. So we have Manaus, and we have the municipality of Tabatinga in the border with Colombia, and we're talking about 1,600 kilometers going up Rio Solimões, the Solimões River, and this navigation, when everything is comfortable and when the tide is up, it takes 5 to 6 days. But then when the tide goes down, we're talking about a navigation of 10 days. And this example is simple because we have more challenging contexts. So here in Juruá, in yellow, this takes 15 days, and 15 days when the tide is up, and up to 30 when the tide is down. So when it goes into Juruá, the Juruá River, it is sinuous and full of debris and stones and wood. So it's very complicated to have water for the southwest of the Amazon because of these challenges. So I really like to talk about this context, this general context, to be able to understand the importance of the work that Navegam does in this territory. So Navegam came up in 2019 to bring digitalization of the water passage. So especially in the Amazon, the transport that is used the most is boats, and I'm talking about intermunicipal transport. So 70% of the municipalities, they connect with Manaus only through boats or through the air, through airplanes. But aviation, commercial aviation is extremely expensive. In some places, it becomes very, very sporadic. So due to issues of economic vulnerability, then we have water transport. And this was completely manual, analogic, and we did not have systematization because it was not a sector, and it is not part of the aviation sector. So, so this is the online boats. You know, we check that just like we do with any airline company, but inside our context in 2019, it was something that was completely innovative and revolutionary. So over here, you go into navegam.com.br and you're able to buy your ticket for 82 chinchinas in the Amazon and a partnership of 200 boats. So this generated a lot of data about the water navigation, and it was very important for us to understand the behavior of this population. And when we talk about social impacts, we always say that we are concerned in distributing this solution that Navegam brings according to the people who live there as well. So in this picture, this is the famous POS of this credit card machine, but in fact, it's not. It's a device for selling to small transport agencies. So we distributed these POSs for people who already sold the tickets, and then they're able to sell through our platform. They receive their commission, and also having linearity in terms of the sales, because it is more reliable, especially for those passengers who they bought a ticket that was not real. That's very common. It was a fake ticket. We have so many B2C, and the customer goes into our platform and buys the passage, and they can also go with the local agents in the capital and also in several municipalities. So we brought a way of being able to relate to the transport, water transport.
O nosso relacionamento com as embarcações, que muitas vezes são negócios familiares e também muito analógicos, né, já existia, e a gente pensou em uma outra solução, que foi a Navegam Log. A Navegam Log,
we have a solution now that was Navegam Log.
Uma sistematização para toda a cadeia de logística de varejo na Amazônia.
So this is something that came up, and what used to happen before, to be able to get to a certain municipality, you're a retailer, for example, you have a store, and you want to take something to the countryside, you are not able to have this whole chain mapped up in a safe way or in a systematic way. So Navegam created a platform to look at freights, to take care of freights, so that we would be able to integrate and provide visibility in the tracking of this product. Ever since the moment that it comes out of its distribution center until it gets to the house of the consumer. So this can also seem to be simple, and I always play around. I say, working with logistics where you have paved roads, that's very easy, very quick, but in dimensions that I showed you, it is a lot more challenging. So nowadays we have 2 customers that receive our solution, that use our solution. The first one is our direct customer that hires us, the retailer who wants to increase his distribution to the municipalities, hires us. And as soon as he inserts his invoices inside our platform, we manage this freight. So we take it from the distribution center, his distribution center, then this goes through the hands of all of our logistics operators until it gets to the final destination. But the indirect customer, which is benefited from our solution, and this is who we always think about, our attitudes and solutions, these are exactly the people who live in the Amazon communities that have difficult access. Because nowadays, if Paulo wants to buy a cell phone, in 12 hours or in one day, it's going to be in his house. And if he goes into a site and buys it, it's going to be in his house. But what about that person who lives in a community and it is distant from a certain municipality? It's 2, 3, or 4 days away by boat in Manaus. This person has the same right to have access to the product, just like people who live in capitals or cities that are more developed. And this is where we come in. So today, these people have the challenge of accessing the products that they need And we take these products to their homes, giving safety to those who sell, because the people who own stores, they follow us through the platform, all of the different phases in the course of the transport of this product. And as I always say, Navegam provides dignity of access to products that are consumed by the Amazon population, so that everybody will have the same right of purchasing as the people who live in the big capitals. Of course, there is a huge challenge involved, especially when the waters are low, and I'd like to give you a practical example of that. So this is a satellite picture of the municipality of Tefe. And this is one of the large municipalities, and it is in the middle of the state, and it almost becomes a hub for the distribution to other municipalities. And this is what we have in the reality. So if you check, let me over here. So if you look at this black boat, this is where this is where the boats stay. This is where the boats are left, right in front of the port, in front of the city. And this is a branch of the Solimões River. So this is a picture of the ebb tide. And the ebb tide, this boat cannot stay here because there's no water. And he has to be 30 kilometers away from the port over here. And this path is done with very small boats that have motors, where our local deliverers, they have to take all the products from the boat and they have to do this in the mud. And sometimes this path takes 6 hours. So this is the reality that we face when we talk about logistics here in the Amazon. So we have to stop and think, I'm not only talking about products, consumption products, I'm talking about food, I'm talking about medication and cooled products, and imagine doing this with highly perishable products several times a day and for months, which is, the time that our low water season lasts. And it is bringing infrastructure solutions for the low water. So this is not an atypical phenomenon anymore in our region. It is a reality. So if we already have, just like we as a company, we program ourselves for this low water times, and we prepare ourselves because we start studying the ebb tide 5 months before. So since March, we've been studying the behavior of the ebb tide that is going to happen this year, so that we'll be prepared to anticipate and have the better pathways traced out and find out the best ways to get to the municipalities. So if we, as a private initiative, already do this kind of study, why doesn't the public initiative do the same thing? It's always reactive, never preventive. So it's not that the issue over here is not because the companies need to have great access. It's for the population, and our operational cost in the ebb tide doubles, but this is our role, and we pay this price because we understand that as a business that has, a social impact. So I could say, okay, I'm not going to supply municipality XYZ because there's an operational cost that is too high. That would be very comfortable for me. But my role is to bring the products that these people need because they have the same rights that I can have over here in Manaus, even when it's the ebb tide. So the invitation that I leave here the thing we have to reflect upon is to bring all of the interested parties. They have to think about preventive actions so that we will be able to have more comfort and dignity for these Amazon communities. And not only think about reactive attitudes that sometimes don't bring the efficacy that is necessary. So Navegam, thank God, is a company that has been growing a lot, but it has been growing based on these challenges and always working on its social impact, which is the dignity of access for our communities.
Muito obrigada, Michelle.
Thank you very much, Michelle. Thank you very much for showing us these challenges and the logistics involved, what we have in the Amazon. So we heard a little bit about the hub. We heard about the bank. We heard about the challenges and difficulties in infrastructure, as well as what the concrete challenges are. And now we have the logistic challenges. So I would like to go back to Sheila, and I would like to ask her about the labor relation that they have in the bank. So in the hubs, in the cities, and also with these very concrete issues as we see in Manaus and Belém. So I would like you to tell us about how this work is done with the cities. What is the relationship that you have with this kind of work that is done with the communities where you are operating from nowadays? Thank you. Thank you. I'm going to continue my presentation, and I wanted to show you over here. I don't know if you can see the screen. Yes, we can see it. Just a minute. I think it's not in the presentation module. So in the presentation mode, is it on now? Yes. Okay, so I wanted to talk a little bit about how we have done this work in the communities, and I have selected a few communities, and this is the opening of an account in the communities by the river and providing technical assistance. Over here, we have a task force in Tajuru. It was a team from the bank, and how we have done this, and going by boat and providing mobile antennas and connectivity to address this population by the river, this community that lives by the river. And then another protocol that we did in Acre with an indigenous community. And I'd like to talk about the credit activation event I'm going to participate in. So next Saturday, I'm going from Manaus to Porto Velho. From Porto Velho, I'm going to get a car, and we're going to go to Lábrea. And from Lábrea, we're going to go by boat to a community, the cocoa community, and we're going to spend 28 hours on this boat together with a Conexus company, which is the partner for credit activation. They're working on this, and then we're going to look for the rural producers. We're going to go to this community. So on the 28th, this is a day of credit activation. What do we do there? So on this day, we also understood that the communities, rural producers, in some situations, they don't understand how they can access credit. So it's a day where we explain about the documentation that they need to have access to rural credit in the case of family agriculture. And then we take some partners as well. And if there's the possibility of the issuing of documentation, and there's also a presentation that we make. So it's a whole day we spend at in the community to activate credit. This is the event that we organize. And then there's a continuation. We have a process. We also take the manager of the agency, of that place. So we have an agency of Banco do Brasil, so we take the manager over, and then we provide the opening of the accounts. And the main objective is for this credit to get to that rural producer, that person who lives in an indigenous community or by the river. So this is how we're working in this region. And we also had some events in Belém. We had a mission in Tumiaçu in Pará and in Barcarena in Pará as well, and other organizations like this one, which is credit activation activity. And what we want is to always be closer. I don't know if we're still going to have some questions or if we're going to be able to speak a little more, but the message that I have that I wanted to leave you with is that our greatest aspiration, our main ambition in bioeconomy is to support these communities and respecting their local traditions and improve productivity in these production chains and leverage the economy and improve the quality of life of these people. And this is the main objective with this bioeconomic hub. Thank you. Thank you for being able to talk to you. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Sheila. So you told us how you work with quality and the importance of organization, the financial aspects involved. And what we could ask Paulo now is, well, it's two things. On the one hand, how can this institutional circulation be done and the investments that are necessary to everyone in the Amazon that you were talking about, the importance of institutional articulation, and what is your perspective? But on the other hand, what are important things to strengthen these communities? Thank you, Maria Camila. Thank you for the question. I think, first of all, we need to create a table and have everybody sit at this table, and everything will be translated into a technical language and create an instrument, a governance platform to discuss, infrastructure that is essential. Nowadays, I think I'm going to talk about the Amazon a little more, which is where I am, and this is where I've worked for a long time. So the Amazon is making an effort to create this table in basic sanitation. So recently they created a governance mechanism called micro-region of basic sanitation, and it is being structured right now. So Sheila created it, and you have a regimen, you have the organizations, the stakeholders of this sanitation movement, and all the municipalities of the Amazon, all the social society organizations, civil society organizations. There's representation from the community bases. There's the representation of the academic world and also the private sector. So I think the creation of these governance mechanisms, this is necessary to put everybody at the same table, to know who is doing what, and to be able to do it together, because it's very complex, because we have a great gap related to access to these services, related to infrastructure, and at the same time, we have the overlapping in some places of different institutions doing the same thing. So we need governance, we need to create a platform with this format for the microregions. This is being strengthened. This is highly necessary. However, we cannot discuss, as I said before, we are not able to discuss basic sanitation. We're not able to talk about access to water, access to sanitation, solid waste, and without looking at other components of the infrastructure. So this is the bias of energy, because I worked and I'm still working with energy, with power. So we cannot talk about sanitation without energy, without power. And something that needs to be created now, and it does not exist in my experience here in the Amazon. I don't know about other places in Brazil or other regions, thinking about Latin America and the Caribbean. The planning that brings together these different areas, energy and water, energy and basic sanitation, you cannot divide that. So everybody tries to create their governance mechanisms, and the conversation between the sectors is not very common. So we have to connect the sectors. So this is the message that I would like to leave with you. And I go back to when talking about what is happening. So besides the institutional arrangement, the governance that is a great bottleneck, we have to remember that we need money to do this. We need investment, and infrastructure is not cheap. So in the case of many governments, they have to look for an interesting funding to make this pre-requirement feasible, so that you can have sustainable development in these territories, if they're indigenous territories or quilombola or by the rivers or municipalities. And if the government does not have financial mechanisms to supply these needs, I can see that a dialogue with, for example, BID is extremely necessary for this discussion to, be transformed from an idea and become something, becomes a reality. And then I go back to mention the need for understanding the real needs. So we have to talk to the community bases to do the planning that is adequate. Just like Michele said, today in the Amazon, you plan infrastructure. If you plan infrastructure without knowing if it's the ebb flow, the ebb tide, or the low water, they call it sega in the communities. If you don't place this variable in your planning equation, this is money that is going to be wasted. So we have to understand the local reality. We need to talk to the bases to know if that investment actually makes sense. And if you, for example, talk about rural electrification, so if it makes sense to get a network from the city and take it to the indigenous community or by the river and make it something centralized, these are important things to think about when we talk about water supply. And basically we have this in our region, but if I only have wells, we also need a generator. So maybe the generator, it could be solar powered, for example, not diesel powered. So this is a little bit of what UNICEF is doing, and we've been working. UNICEF believes a lot in this connection between water and energy, and encouraging the use of these solar powered pumping systems in our projects. Because if there's no energy because you don't have a good network, you don't have water. If you don't have energy because the river has dried out, you don't have water that comes to the community if they use diesel-powered pumps. So I don't like the idea of one solution that is going to, solve everything, the famous silver bullet, right? That's what we call it in our sector. But the experience has been telling us that there are some issues that need to be encouraged, and energy and water are very important. So increased reserves in the communities, and we don't really have this culture of doing this. And to conclude, it is also very important to check the place. So we need to spend energy with research, talk to the academic world, talk to the basis to understand the local arrangements of power or water with the participation of the public, or with associations or cooperatives, and making that micromanagement of the community. So it is necessary for us to understand the reality of that community. We have to bring the academic world to develop an adequate arrangement. And from then on, we can talk about local management according to the reality of that territory. Thank you. Thank you very much, Paulo. I think you have told us about fundamental elements in this conversation, and I know how important this collaboration is. Always listening to the local communities and the need to look at the processes and to prioritize them. So now I'm going to give the floor to Michele. And from another sector, she has shown some solutions brought by Navegam Log. So how do you support the populations in the Amazon so that they will have access to these products and to supply them with what they need? But I would also like to, in some way, I would like to know how you think about these new markets and how they help to think about other sources that could be sources of revenue for this population, the population in this Amazon region. So how can you think about the new products and the new products that are being produced in the Amazon for them to get to new markets? So how can you scale up new businesses, and what do you think about the perspectives of Navegam for the future, and how can you enhance this sort of work of the production that happens in this region of the country? So, as we acquired experience with logistics and with the dynamics over here in our region, and we started understanding our role as something that has a social impact, we began to create a different side, another initiative called Navegam Rio, where we began to connect small producers, small associations of producers who are far from the capital, mainly, with people and institutions and companies who need to buy those Amazonic products. And when we have the logistics that go from the capital and go to the countryside, so the logistics has to come back as well. So the same boat that goes has to come back, but many times it comes back empty. So what we're doing is working backwards and enhancing this path so that the rural producers, the local rural producers that are in the middle of the forest, for them to be able to have a flow of their products in an organized and safe fashion, and also systematically. So we started talking to them, we started understanding their needs, where the bottlenecks were, and we understood that the bottlenecks were in logistics because they didn't know how to do this follow-up so that the product would get to the end destination, the final destination, and they were not able to make connections either. So we have some operations that we work with. We have the tambaqui operation that we send to restaurants in São Paulo. Last month, we sent 30 tons of tambaqui. So this is a way of being able to support this local production so that they will have an increased amount of revenue, because the big bottleneck was the systematization of the logistics and the connections. So if today we're able to make connections with several buyers buyers who need the socio-bioeconomic products. So we introduce them to the local producers, and then we are able to be responsible for the logistics of the products. And this is how we're finding a few solutions to be able to encourage the local initiatives.
Muchas gracias, Michelle.
Thank you very much, Michelle. And we are coming close to the end of this very interesting conversation. And I have learned a lot about the experience and the passion that you all have. And I think that to conclude, I'd like to ask each of you to, in 30 seconds, give us a final message that you want to give to the audience, that you want to leave with the audience. So you talked about very important elements for us to think about, for us to improve and strengthen and collaborate with. And I think it would be very useful to have a last message from all of you, just very short and concrete. And let us start with Michelle. Great. So first of all, I would like to invite everybody who's interested in the topic of the Amazon to go to the Amazon, spend 3-4 days, 1 week inside the forest to understand the difficulties that our population faces. And I always say, you know, to be in the capital of the Amazon is completely different from being in the middle of the forest. And that's why we need to know about the realities. And if you want to know our work more, just go to navegam.com.br. Thank you very much, Michelle. Paulo?
Claro. A mensagem é que
yes, the message is that we need to
acesso
guarantee
básico
access to basic
e energia de
sanitation
qualidade para as pessoas
and
para
quality
garantir qualidade.
energy for people to
Só assim a gente
guarantee
vai
quality.
ter
And this is the only way that we'll be able
desenvolvimento
to
sustentável
have sustainable
da nossa
development
região.
in our region. Thank you.
Gracias, Paulo. Y bueno,
Thank you,
la última
Paulo.
palabra, Sheila.
And the last one, Sheila. I would like to thank you for the invitation to talk about the Bioeconomic Hub in Brazil. And I'd like to say that I'm very happy and I learned a lot today with Michelle, Paulo, you, Maria Camila. Thank you very much for inviting me, and hopefully we'll be able to continue talking. And I think always in bioeconomy, we're going to find someone who can help us in something. So I heard a lot of connection in what Michelle said with our bioeconomic hub and the infrastructure from Paulo. So I am available. The Bioeconomy Hub is available. And thank you very much for the invitation. I think we all dream the same thing as a daughter of this earth. I hope that in a few years we can go back to this place and we see that we were able to develop this place. Yesterday, I talked about, about living in the Amazon, what it means to live close to the forest and the river. And this is very strong inside me. I'm from here. So to be able to work in the Amazon for the Amazon has a lot of meaning for me, means a lot to me, right? So thank you very much for the invitation to this event. Have a great morning. Thank you very much. Thank you, everyone. It was a very diverse conversation. We learned a lot, and we hope it has been useful for the Pan-Amazon Network as well, this innovation forum about investment in bioeconomy as well that we had today. And hopefully you'll be able to connect to other players looking at different perspectives that complement the work that has been done in the network. So thank you very much, everyone. Thank you very much, and see you next time.